WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Josh Manning, Deputy Managing Editor for Assignment. Joining me today, Joey Chester, you're not supervised. He's my right-hand guy in Assignment.
Did I just get a promotion?
He's
on
live
live on air?
Yes, you got a TV promotion. That's right. And on my left, new reporter for the Western Journal, Grant Heshinson. Let's see here. Big stuff today. Well, you're not an intern anymore, so I can't mock you that way.
You can.
Be new and inventive ways. So stuff to talk about today. We have got some pretty decent coverage, pretty big coverage of recent SCOTUS abortion decision and backlash to that. This is one of the most pro-life decisions I think the court has ever made. And of course, the left is furious and fuming that it will be more difficult to kill babies in Texas. We're going to examine that. We are also going to be looking at the anti-Joe Biden movement that really is, it's creeping outside of political channels and political quarters, and it's making its way now into athletics and even college sports. Grant's going to be talking about that. But first off, as we continue to watch the wake of Joe Biden's horrible withdrawal from Afghanistan and defeat there, almost intentional, perhaps intentional defeat of the United States military in Afghanistan. Now the Afghan citizens are suffering because the Taliban is in control. And as the establishment media is fond of saying, women and children really are being hit hardest there. And Joey, you've got a story, particularly if you're sensitive, if you're very squeamish, if gruesome isn't quite the right word for it, but this is a pretty graphic story. Just be warned. But this is a story about what happened when the Taliban got their hands on one pregnant woman.
You know, I have been referring to the Taliban as Joe Biden's latest allies. I mean, they are talking about, they relied on the Taliban for security. They are talking about giving foreign aid to the Taliban now that they run Afghanistan. And the citizens of Afghanistan that were abandoned are now forced to live under the Taliban rule. And it is turning out to be absolutely horrific, as any rational person could have predicted. It is especially bad for women, as one Afghan family sadly found out over the weekend. Some Taliban fighters tracked down a female cop. She worked in the prison back when Afghanistan was actually run by Afghanistan citizens, not by a group of terrorists.
Warlords from the 7th century.
Yeah. So the Taliban entered this woman's
Joe Biden,
house.
Before it was run by Joe Biden's new allies.
Yes.
That's how to put this.
Biden's
7th century
cronies.
religious warriors, Joe Biden's new allies before they were running Afghanistan. Sorry.
Yes. So the Taliban, what did you refer to them as? Warlords?
7th century barbarian warlords.
Yes. So when the warlords entered this woman's house, they tied her hands and they shot and killed her. And then they took screwdrivers and other tools and they tore her brain out of her head in front of her family. And she's also 8 months pregnant. So not only did they murder the woman, but also the baby. It is one of the most truly horrific stories that I have seen out of Afghanistan since the Taliban took over. I'd like to share with you, and warning before these pictures, they are graphic. They don't show the woman's body, but they do show the aftermath of the crime scene. I just would like to show those to give you guys an idea of just how horrific this was. As you can see, I mean, there's just blood everywhere. I believe that is her body wrapped up. I actually saw the picture of her body after she was killed, and it is one of the hardest things I've had to look at. I mean, her head was half gone. I mean, her brain was out of her head, out of her skull. And this happened in front of her family, all because she's a woman, and she worked as a cop when Afghanistan was run by the citizens. And, I'd like to tie this back to, because this is, I think, one of the most sick comparisons that has been made in the last week since the Texas abortion law. The American left has decided that, if you're a woman living in Texas, it's like living under Taliban rule due to this abortion law. When we literally know that a woman had her brain ripped out and her unborn child murdered in Afghanistan living under Taliban rule, but they're equivalent somehow.
This is actually the exact opposite of that, because we want to protect the unborn baby, not have it ripped from the womb.
Yes.
This is the exact opposite.
The Taliban has no care or respect for the life of babies. None whatsoever. They demonstrated that. The comparison, it makes me sick. I mean, what do you guys make of this? Is this because of Joe Biden's decision? Is this going to become the norm in Afghanistan? Is there anything we can do? What do you guys think?
I don't really know how much difference we can make at this point now that we've made, our full withdrawal. We're not there anymore. I think
we could always reinvade.
We could,
Lindsey Graham.
Yes,
reinvade, as Lindsey Graham said, which I don't think is necessarily the right path either. I don't know. I feel like, to your first question, is this going to become the norm? I mean, I would hope that it won't be this graphic all the time, but this idea of women and children being disrespected, being even killed at times, I think those are things that we're going to see in Afghanistan. And I wish that I could come up with an answer of how we can kind of prevent those things or help those things, but right now I'm not sure what there is we can do to help.
I guess a better way to frame the question is, were situations like this preventable? Did this happen to this woman? Was there something that we could have done to help stop this?
Yeah, the same thing we've done for 20 years, occupy Afghanistan.
Right.
So that's a legitimate question. For those of you who are watching, I'm betting you're split on this. I bet a lot of you folks are thrilled that we got out of there and think, get rid of endless wars, et cetera, et cetera. I bet there are a lot of people who think, well, it was unfortunate that we had to be posted over there, but we're posted lots of places that's unfortunate. We hang out in South Korea and we hang out in Germany, and essentially the two reasons that our soldiers are there are in those places is to die. That was especially the case during the Cold War in Germany. The entire point of having them there was that if the Russians struck, or if the East Germans decided to do something crazy, it would immediately marshal the American sense of national pride and patriotism, because we would have lost men and women in uniform. So it's not a new idea that we would occupy an area, that we would be deployed to an area. Occupation is not something we do especially well, though it had been 18 months since a service person had been killed, servicemen had been killed in Afghanistan. And you didn't have this stuff going on writ large. Now, I suspect there were still cases, fringe cases of this. And you see that all over the world. You see that in places that have not been Christianized, in places that have not been liberalized. You read stories about it in India pretty frequently. But it did not have to be this way. Of course not. It wasn't this way for 20 years, or for almost 20 years, however long it took the U.S. to get Afghanistan under control, which did take some time. It did not have to be like this, but it is. And the thing that worries me most is that now, instead of fighting ISIS-K, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, whatever franchise is out there, instead of fighting them in Afghanistan, which was George Bush's entire point to going over there, we're going to have to fight them here now. That was the point. The point. Now, we had hoped we could democratize those regions, but one of the broad points for going over there was we decided, all right, we're going to fight radical Islam there and not on Manhattan Island.
Right.
Yeah, I think this kind of gets to that false dichotomy that Joe Biden and his administration have been trying to push, mostly because that's the only way that they can kind of avoid this terrible PR I mean, it's more than that. It's obviously a tragedy, but the only way that they can avoid the horrible press and the horrible results for their administration that would probably come from this is if they kind of present it as this false dichotomy of our only choices were we could stay and have an endless war, or we could pull out and it would be ugly like this. There's a third choice. There's lots of choices, but there's a third broad choice of we could have had an actual plan to pull out, similar to the way that Trump did. Maybe not exactly the same. Maybe there are some things you would have changed, and that's fine. But we could have had a plan. We could have had conditions in place. There are ways that we could have avoided this drastic of an outcome. And instead, Joe Biden's only desperate attempt is to say, well, yes, it's ugly, things that are happening, the way that we pulled out, things that are happening now, but the alternative was, an endless war, so at least we're not doing that. That's false. That's just a logical fallacy that he is trying to push, but that's the rhetoric that we've been hearing.
I don't think I would support the idea of keeping the war going in Afghanistan. I think what I'm most disgusted about is the Biden administration's positive rhetoric towards the Taliban and the trusting of the Taliban.
Our new allies.
Our new allies, and the believing them when they say they're going to respect women all of a sudden when they're literally ripping a woman's brains out. That's what makes me angry is going on TV in front of the American people telling us this, and then we have photos of a woman with her brains ripped out. And Joe Biden says, oh, we trust the Taliban. Yeah, we're probably going to send them money. They're going to work with us. We're going to rely on them for security. Oh, and by the way, they're holding Americans hostage at the airport right now who are still trapped in Afghanistan. It's just a disaster to me.
Yeah, I don't know of anywhere off the top of my head in the Middle East that is worse than, there are even the clerics that run Iran, you don't see this level of violence happening, again, writ large, which is what you're seeing in Afghanistan. You don't see it in Saudi Arabia either. The Saudis are actually trying to liberalize.
Right.
Whether that's successful or not is I can't decide that, but things are better there than they used to be. But this is what the other thing to take away is that this is what fundamentalist Islam looks like. These folks are the Islamic equivalent of sort of Southern Baptist or Independent Baptist. These are just people who take their book really seriously, and that's terrifying to think of. That is absolutely terrifying to think of. Don't make the mistake of thinking that Christianity and Islam are the same. Islam has a political component, and it desires, where Christianity desires actually to serve and to love, Islam, the entire point behind it is to dominate and to rule. So that is a great setup for our next piece, Joey, because we're talking about essentially women's rights in under the Taliban, under Islamic fundamentalism. And you started that out talking about Texas and the recent SCOTUS ruling. Well, I've got a couple of pieces on that I want to bring you guys. First off is a piece written by Naomi Ishaka. Ishisaka. There we go. Sorry, Naomi Ishisaka. And this was in the Seattle, the Seattle Times. She's a Seattle Times columnist. The title, Texas Anti-Abortion Law Turns Everyday Citizens into Bounty Hunters. And it starts off like this. A woman gets an abortion. She's setting up a story here. A woman gets an abortion after learning she's pregnant 2 months after being raped. She asked her friend for a ride to a clinic, to have the procedure. Her friend tells another friend about the abortion. The other friend, who has nothing to do with any of it, is anti-choice and reports the abortion to prolifewhistleblower.com. I wonder if that's real. That's probably not real. Which results in the driver friend, the clinic provider, and everyone involved being fined a minimum of $10,000 plus legal fees for, quote, aiding and abetting an abortion. There's no cap on the damages a court can impose. So she argues that this is turning everyday people into bounty hunters. The problem is there's no bounty on this. There's no reward for turning people in. You don't get $10,000 for turning in someone who's had an abortion.
No, that's not what the word bounty means.
That's not what the word bounty means. She goes on to say, and just to give you an even better idea of where this is coming from, one of the next lines in the piece is, as they have throughout time, women and pregnant people.
Oh, those pregnant people.
Women and pregnant people.
Pregnant people
will always find ways to terminate pregnancies.
Such a lie.
About 70% of Texas abortions in 2019 were provided to people of color. That should actually stick out to somebody who's interested
in. It's a big problem.
Is that supposed
equity.
to be like? Is that supposed to be like an SJW talking point?
Yes, it is.
It seems to me that's bad.
We need to kill more black babies. That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
We need to save abortion so that we can let the impoverished communities.
It's to rabbit trail for just a second. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier today with vouchers, with school vouchers.
Yeah.
Arizona and Florida both now allow families to basically pull their kids out of school if there's a mask mandate, and they will give them a voucher to go to private school. And I was saying how I hope every one of those vouchers is taken by a black or Hispanic student.
Absolutely.
Especially the ones who are locked in unbelievably bad urban schools, because this could actually get them out and give them some hope. But the left doesn't want that to happen. They want them to stay in those failing schools. The same way that this woman doesn't see an issue with 70% of Texas abortions being to women of color. I'm sorry, to women or birthing people.
That's
not only is it not an
number.
issue, she sees it as like a win.
This is like it's a good thing that most abortions are being provided to people of color. To me that's horrifying. That says to me there's a problem that needs to be solved, because that number. Because I bet you if you look at them as a proportion of the population, they're maybe 5%, 10% of overall Texas population. I'm not sure, but for it to be 70%. That's it. Yeah, that's a wildly scary number.
Yeah, it is. And Thomas Sowell, I was watching him being interviewed one time, and he was arguing with a social services administrator. And he said, it's amazing how you pick up halfway through the story with the person already the single mother. And his point was, there's no reason that has to happen. There doesn't have to be a predetermined percentage of people who are single mothers or a predetermined percentage of women who decide to go get abortions. An enormous amount of this, actually all of it except the rape and incest side of it, can be solved simply through making good decisions or living in a essentially a way that comports with the Bible.
And that's another point too, is like, of course she has to start her little diatribe with, this woman got raped, and now this, that's such a minuscule percentage of the abortions that happen. And to say that abortion writ large should be allowed because of that small percentage, it's just so misguided.
The left on abortion hinges so many of their arguments on rape and incest when they're less than 1% of total pregnancies and of abortions that occur. It is such a stupid, idiotic point to hang an argument on, yet they constantly do it. But on the other hand of that, it shows how weak their arguments are against it, because that's the only thing that they can come up with that they think is logical to argue against being pro-life.
Yes. And when you read the little scenario that the Seattle Times reporter put out there, if this were a case of murder, if we had a man has his wife murdered after learning she's pregnant, he has his friend take a car and run her over. The friend tells another friend, the other friend turns him in, and they get fined $10,000. I mean, that's justice. That's what that is. That's justice if it's murder. And here's the deal. They won't accept the premise that abortion is murder because they don't accept the premise that that's when life begins.
Well, even if you don't accept that it's murder, it's a law. You don't have to like the law, but to say that somebody, a citizen enforcing the law, is then a vigilante or a bounty hunter, like you can not support the law, but it is a law. So the citizens are helping support the law.
So if I see someone driving drunk and I call them in and they get arrested for a DUI, am I a bounty hunter because I called in the drunk driver? I mean,
you know what? Yes, you are. According to this, you know what I'm really surprised about, and I'm sure it's just because she didn't think of it. But the KKK at one point they were essentially bounty hunters. They were essentially vigilante groups. So I am very surprised that she's not actually linking this to the KKK.
Yeah.
Well, the left founded
she
the
really
KKK.
missed.
So
Democrats founded it.
So.
That's right.
What's that guy who Joe Biden's like best friends with?
Oh yeah, he spoke at his.
I can't remember his name now.
U.S. Senator?
The KKK guy.
Robert Byrd?
Yes, Bird. Yes, that's
yeah,
it. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Biden
yeah.
spoke at his funeral, didn't he?
Yeah. Big guy.
Yeah.
Big wizard. I think he was a wizard. So, and if you
10%
remember, I mean,
big
Trent
guy.
Lott was nuked as Senate Majority Leader after he said something favorable about Byrd, I think, and then we elect Joe freaking Biden. And that's perfectly fine. So I actually had another piece I wanted to get to. Is about a comedian being canceled for talking about his pro-life stance and doing so in kind of a crude way, which comedians are wont to do. But we're about out of time on that. So Grant, we've come from women's issues and international issues to abortion issues, domestic issues, and now we're coming to Biden and how America in general is responding.
Exactly, we are. I want to start with some good news, and that good news is that college football has returned. I know that Josh is so excited about that.
Not care less.
Josh doesn't care. A lot of people do care, though, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention I'm wearing my Virginia Tech shirt. The beloved alma mater, Virginia Tech Hokies, took down the execrable Tar Heels.
How'd they come up with that name?
I'm sorry. Well, that's a whole different story.
It's a whole nother episode.
Comes from a chant, but it's okay. We'll get into that later. But they did win. They took down the Tar Heels. Sorry if you're a Tar Heels fan, but I'm actually not because they're the worst. But that's not what the story is about. The story is about college football coming back. And in that, the fans of college football kind of expressing this pro-America stance that in many cases even has gone past pro-America and towards anti-Joe Biden outwardly.
That sounds like the same thing to me. Grant.
Yes.
That sounds very much
that is
like
true.
the same
They
thing
could be
to
considered
me.
the same thing.
Biden supporters tend to hate America.
That is true. That is true. We'll start with a story that is not outwardly anti-Biden, although you could say that the sentiment being expressed is anti-Joe Biden, anti what he stands for. There was a mother of a U.S. Marine who showed up at College Game Day, which is like ESPN's pregame show that they do weekly for college football.
Yeah.
And she showed up with a sign at College Game Day saying that she is the mother of a U.S. Marine. And at the bottom of the sign, it says that she is against kneeling. It says, "I don't kneel." And they actually showed this sign on ESPN, which is a very leftist network.
That's surprising.
They showed it. I believe we have a picture of it that we can pull up. But they showed this sign, and it says, "I am against kneeling, and I am the mother of a U.S. Marine." And so that's kind of a strong endorsement from somebody who we're supposed to be representing. This argument that we have is that, the American flag is representing those who fight for our freedom. It's representing our military. It's representing our country. And a lot of times people say, oh, well, that's not actually true. The military doesn't feel that way. Here you have a military mom who's saying, we do feel this way and we do stand for the flag. And especially in light of, the Marines that we've lost recently in Afghanistan. I just feel like this is an important message to kind of be getting out there. And I don't know if you guys agree with that or think that this really means anything or if it's just kind of a one-off incident.
I mean, I couldn't imagine the feeling of being a parent of a U.S. service member right now after the 13 were tragically killed in Afghanistan. Was that last week or the week before? So this mom, I imagine it meant a lot to her to send that message to America that I'm not going to kneel for the flag. I'm going to stand for the flag, because her son is a Marine, and there were just 10 or 11 Marines slaughtered in Afghanistan. This message makes me really happy to see. Now, I can't imagine the nightmare it would have been for, it was ESPN, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would have occurred if they didn't allow her to go on TV with that sign, considering the events of the last couple of weeks.
And it is interesting because I've been to College Game Day before to come to Blacksburg when I was in school, and they do vet the signs that they allow on there. And there are signs that if they have, a curse word or whatever, they're not allowed to go into the area where they might get on camera. So it's interesting that they probably did see that sign and I guess allowed it to go through, or they just missed what it said on the bottom. I'm not sure which one it is. But
imagine telling the mother of a Marine after Marines were just killed that you can't come in with her sign, that's pro-America. That would be such a bad look and a really disgusting move to make against that mother. That's what I think.
Is football the one where they try to get the inflated pigskin down the pasture?
Hopefully it's not
simplest
deflated.
terms. Yes.
Okay, all right. I was just curious.
And there's some things, right?
There's goalposts.
Yes,
they're yellow. Yeah, you kick the ball through them sometimes.
So the thing about sports. Sports is useful because it actually lets us become tribal. It gives us an outlet for tribalism.
That's true.
That's not overtly violent.
Yeah, that's a good point,
Josh. Off the field.
That's a good point.
That's actually useful.
I like the unity of sports too, like the fans. There's something about that I like, that sports transcends politics sometimes.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that, because my next point that I wanted to make was that across the country we saw, in some cases, hundreds of thousands, at least tens of thousands of fans gathering in countless stadiums, most of them full for the first time in nearly 2 years, and kind of making a statement, that America is coming back. We're having sporting events. We're gathering together. And I had just a couple videos here that I wanted to show of fans just gathering. This first one is actually from a red, white, and blue game that Texas A&M did to honor 9/11. They originally did it in 2001, and then they did a 20th anniversary version of it this year, and so they dressed up red, white, and blue.
That's cool they do that.
And then this is, I will get made fun of, but this is Blacksburg, Virginia, the greatest university of all time. Doing our
service
entrance
members on the field.
Service members on the field. Those are members of the Corps of Cadets.
Oh wow!
That we actually have at Virginia Tech, which is pretty rare. There's not a lot of public universities that are non-military schools that have their own Corps of Cadets. So that's pretty cool. There's definitely a lot of national pride that kind of goes on at Virginia Tech. But just seeing these fans gathered together and seeing there are multiple videos. We didn't put them in the show here because they are explicit, but there are multiple videos of at least 4 games over the weekend, one of which was Virginia Tech, one of which was the Texas A&M game that we also showed, of students and other fans chanting F Joe Biden during the games. So it's a clear sentiment of, we are here, we're not going to be told anymore that we can't go to games, that we can't gather together. And do you guys think this signals some sort of turning point for Americans, saying that we're not going to be told what to do anymore? Or do you think that if tomorrow the CDC or whoever comes out and says that we need to quarantine again, are people going to listen?
I think I almost think it's a rebellious thing to do. Screw you, CDC. You've had us locked up for going on 2 years now. We're done. We're done. And Joe Biden, you too, we're done with you. You just had service members killed in Afghanistan. You botched the withdrawal. We're done. We're fed up. And I think that's what a lot of this is. a lot of sports were canceled for over a year, and people were locked up in their houses. They couldn't go to events like this. So I think it's almost an expression of letting all that energy out, and it feels rebellious, and you get this energy and enthusiasm we're seeing. And people probably blame Biden for a lot of the restrictions. They blame the CDC, and I think that's responsible for some of the chanting that was heard. I think it's great, and I think it does show the state of the Biden presidency.
Yeah, that's, I think, really good analysis, Joey. Maybe at the end of the day, COVID actually ends up being a blessing. Maybe it opens a lot of people who were apolitical, not interested in politics. Maybe it opens their eyes to the extent to which our benevolent overlords in D.C. Really will try to control our lives if they can get away with it. And you're right, college students are kind of definitionally rebellious.
Right.
We saw, when I was in school 20 years ago, we saw college students trending more conservative. Because that was a backlash, I think, to political correctness. And then things shifted, and you got cancellations on campus, and you got Jigglypuff. Trigglypuff, that's what it was, Trigglypuff. We ought to keep a picture of Trigglypuff on file, just ready to go. And now I think there are signs that it's swinging back with college students toward conservatism, or at least being freedom-minded. So maybe that's what some of this is, and maybe the horrors of COVID actually unite a bunch of people under the conservative side of things, or at least against Joe Biden. There's polling to support that too. We covered that a couple of weeks ago. When you look at how independents and Republicans feel about the direction of the country, they are almost exactly the same, like almost the same number. The direction is certainly the same, with about 2/3 saying they are not happy with the direction of the country. They feel very negatively about it. They feel negatively about it. And only about 1/3 of each saying that they're positive about it. Democrats, on the other hand, were inverted. They were totally flipped. About 2/3 said they felt good about the direction of the country, and only 1/3 said they didn't. So there's some stats that I think are encouraging along those lines.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me you bring up the college point. I can't speak to other colleges. I've never been to Texas A&M's campus. I'm sure it's great. But at Virginia Tech, as much as I enjoyed going there, it was very left-leaning when I was there. And to see videos, these students that are chanting F Joe Biden, that are jumping around, that are gathering, they're Virginia Tech students. It's coming from the student section, and it seems like a distinctly different tone than I experienced when I was there, a few months ago, even before I graduated. It seems like since Joe Biden has taken over, this leftist train of thought has almost crashed a little bit on college campuses, especially during this COVID thing.
I think if you think about COVID and ages, what's the easiest age group to lock down or keep locked down, or who are okay with staying at home, being locked down? It's probably older people. If you're in your 60s and 70s, you probably don't mind having to stay at home or being locked down. It doesn't affect you that much. And you probably are more likely to get the vaccine because you're at a higher risk of dying from the virus. But if you're in your late teens or early 20s, you don't want to be locked down. You want to socialize. You want to go to games. You don't want people telling you what you need to inject in your body. I mean, I think the lowest vaccination group is people in their 20s. So it's really not surprising. And who do you blame for lockdowns and for who's forcing you to get a jab in you? You blame the government, and you go to the highest level and you blame Joe Biden. So maybe even if you're a left-leaning young person, you feel like it's Biden's fault, it's the CDC's fault for wanting you to get vaccinated and wanting you to stay at home. And you're sick of it. I mean, young people who have had cooped up energy for 18 months, it's got to come out. So
to bring it full circle, then, what you just said made me think of the Seattle Times columnist again, and her scenario where she talks about the friend who is anti-choice, but that depends on the choice that's being made.
Yeah, which
right?
choice are we talking
Yes.
about?
What kind of choice?
Exactly, because when it comes to mandatory vaccinations, we know how that breaks down.
Yes,
That is overwhelmingly on the left.
Yeah.
So they are the anti-choice ones in that scenario. And
Kill babies and get vaccines. That's force you to get vaccines. That's
Yeah.
Great
It's
2024 campaign ad.
Yeah.
it's Wendy Davis's new ad in Texas. Oh man! Oh, I'll bet she will be back after this. That crazy abortion happy, ridiculous tennis shoe wearing political hack. Wendy Davis. All right. Anyway. That is it for us on this Monday. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are grateful for you. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to click the little bell. Be sure to click subscribe and then the little bell. That's going to make sure that you get notified when we go live. And thank you for watching us. Thank you for reading articles at westernjournal.com. What we do is actually pretty expensive, and we don't have a billionaire behind us. We're just a small family-owned business. And if you feel led to support us in a more direct way than just reading, we would be incredibly grateful for that. And you can take a look at some options for that at westernjournal.com/join. That's westernjournal.com/join. So remember, we are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. We will be back Wednesday, and you will have a different group of hosts, but they may not actually be as diverse as we are because, as you can see, Joey and I are...
I'm very dark.
Yeah, we are almost as opposite as can be.
I'm more red, so we have all
Yes,
of it.
we're very diverse.
Good Lord, I look like I've got cancer or something. Anyway, for Grant, for Joey, I'm Josh Manning with the Western Journal. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to WJ Live, and I'm joined today by assignment editor Joey Chester, as well as crack reporter Michael Austin.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.